Alright everyone, it's time to talk about the hottest new trend among young women. It is extracting vaginal fluid from your vagina and putting it on your neck in order to get a date. This is considered very important by some of these people. The idea is that if a woman's ovulating anyway, she can use the pheromones from that to become more attractive to men if it is, actually sort of effervescing into her surroundings. There's reason to believe this may actually be true, just to be clear. In most mammalian species, you have a very strong scent response during the mating season. When the female is, ready to go, ovulating, fertile, pheromones are released. And males do respond very, very significantly to this. Now, in humans, the olfactory sense is rather blunted. We have nowhere near the smelling abilities of a wolf or a cat or some of these other creatures. We're on the low end of the totem pole when it comes to that. We basically focus so much on brain power and eyesight and to an extent hearing that we don't taste the rainbow. We don't smell it either unless we're on LSD or something. But this is probably real. To be clear, this probably does provoke some sort of pheromonal response. There have already been studies, women when they're ovulating are rated as more attractive to men in studies. This just amplifies it by making the pheromones more easily available when you're in proximity to a male member of the species. Oh, that's right, gender no longer means anything, so I don't know. It has some sort of effect on certain human individuals, okay? Link in the description, archived of course, comes from the British media. And there are two astroturfs here, and it's coming from the easily panicked, pearl-clutching aspect of society and the legacy media that caters to people that are easily fear-mongered towards, and it makes good clickbait. Oh, your kid is going to eat Tide Pods. Your kid is going to make jankum and try to huff their own shit fumes. We've seen this before. I was told by, the first moral panic when I was a kid, after the AIDS panic sort of dies off, was inhalants. That was the big one. The idea was, the parents would tell their kids, don't you turn the aerosol can right side up and then release those fumes. It could really be bad for you. Kids are trying to get high doing it. Of course, none of us ever thought about doing that before we were told that it was a thing. Most of us knew better than to do it even once we knew. Same with jelking and all this scarfing. Oh, you remember scarfing? Yeah, kids were hanging themselves while beating off and weird shit like that, and parents were all upset over this. I can remember this, of course. I'm a child of the 90s and the 2000s, and it was all sorts of fucked up. The idea that the average person ever did these things, it's like 1% of 1%, if that, usually. And with vabbing, it's the same thing. They're trying to astroturf the idea that it's a big trend. Lots of people are doing it. How did they establish this? They went on TikTok and YouTube. They found one video on the subject. And then they had a journal go out because it sounded clickbaity. Oh my God, look at this weird new shit that young women are doing to get a date. Because they were so hard up for male attention before. And then they looked it up. And they found 2 or 3 other videos. And they really carefully watched those videos of freaks and weirdos saying freakish and weird things. And then they extrapolated this to be a big trend. Oh my God, it trended briefly on Twitter. Clearly it's a cultural phenomenon. Millions of people must be doing it. No, they're not. The average person is not going to do this. Then they try to pair that with the fear-mongering aspect of it, which is, well, it can cause pelvic inflammation. Again, link in the description, archived, of course. It can cause health problems. If you don't clean your hands before you do this, you could get pelvic inflammation and yeast infections. I think the average female probably knows about these things. The average female also fingers themselves. Isn't that what they're doing here, effectively? Except that it's not for the same purpose? So what the fuck is the difference? How many infection cases do you get from that normal behavior as opposed to this abnormal behavior? Again, it's not even without a biological precedent. Even if this were a common theme, who gives a shit? Technically speaking, it probably works. And then you've got this moral panic. Again, how is this even newsworthy, by the way? I'm bringing it up mainly in the frame of the legacy media pandering to the soccer mom audience that will now be very, very... They'll probably put their daughters in chastity belts now worrying about this, just like they forced Tide to change the colors on the Tide Pods, because then if they were less colorful, kids would be less inclined to try to eat them or smoke them in a bong. I watched a video once of a dude smoking a Tide Pod. I'm assuming that it's probably not on YouTube anymore, just to be clear. harmful and dangerous activities. Smoking a Tide Pod is coughing up his lungs and probably had permanent lung damage. The average person does not interact with these sorts of things. The average individual looks at these sorts of things and considers them to be weird and cringy. And the idea, I've also seen another semi-separate AstroTurf, which is the idea that Gen Z has gone completely apeshit and that they're far weirder than anyone else has been. I'll actually be covering how I feel sorry for Gen Z because there was a Legacy Media article that's fundamentally true, although it takes it from the far left position, that they've never seen a time in which the U.S. worked properly. I would say that they got a reprieve under Trump for the first 3 years, but we'll get past that now. Yeah, fundamentally, yeah, that's true. But that doesn't make them weirder. Hell, people in the 1920s, young dudes, used to climb up flagpoles and sit up there for extended periods of time and refuse to come down to impress people, and then it became a trend. Because they didn't have television at the time, they were bored, and so they needed something to do. They did all sorts of weird shit. Your grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, going all the way back to like the dancing sickness of the medieval times when people would dance until they passed out of exhaustion. People do weird shit. That doesn't mean that the average person does weird shit. The average person in the 1920s never sat on top of a flagpole for no apparent purpose. The average person in the 1950s, the average little Jimmy and Sally, did not put airplane glue in the bag and huff it to get high. The average kid of my generation, unfortunately, was never offered all the free drugs we were warned about existing in the DARE program. And the average person now, regardless, is not going to be smearing themselves with their own vaginal discharge. It's just not going to become a cultural phenomenon. Again, even though in this particular case, you're not dealing with something that is actually harmful, and you're dealing with something that I guess, yeah, situationally it could possibly work. Pheromones are a very, very complicated thing, though. So, you know, if you're doing that and your pheromones do not align with your partner, you might actually turn them off. Just to be clear, it's possible. People do match by scent. It's just something we can't fully understand because it's not really a conscious process. It's not the same as looking at someone and saying yes or no, you are or aren't attractive. It's not quite the same. And so, yeah, it's a little bit of a moral panic story here. I thought people would find this one fucking hilarious because imagine that the Legacy Media is astroturfing you to believe that people are smearing their sexual fluids on themselves in order to get a date. Yeah, I think that that's probably a minority of a minority of a minority of individuals, but hey, maybe this is the one time that I'll be wrong, and all of a sudden they'll start fucking selling it in stores, artificially made in a lab somewhere. This will turn everyone on, spray it all over yourself. That'd be really, really funny. And leave it to Bill Gates probably to be the one that jumps on that gravy train. That's about all. Peace out.